Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the HomeTech Podcast. I am Jason Griffing, and I am joined, as always, by my partner, Seth Johnson. Seth, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I have my fourth cold of the season, which is a new record for me, so I'm a little bummed about that, but feeling okay, just a little stuffed up, so you'll have to pardon my voice this week.
It's all right. I hope you feel better. Now that, I get sick quite enough, but now that, we have a daughter, I'm fully expecting to get sick every flu season from now on.
it's lack of sleep, and it all just kind of catches up with you. But, but I'm good, and I think we've got another great show here. I'm excited to be sitting down with you. We had Ram Malasani on, and this is a interview that we've been teasing for a couple of weeks now. Listeners to our show are probably familiar. We had Ram on, I think a couple of months ago to talk about the new Almond 3 family of routers, and Ram is the CEO of Securify. That's the company behind those products, and Almond has been around for a while, and they've really done, in my opinion, some innovative things in the router market, and I think our interview with him highlights another example of that. They've got a new security offering. We won't go into it too much here because we're going to dive into that in the interview if you stay tuned towards the end of the episode. But in short, it's a subscription-based security offering around preventing sort of botnet attacks and these sort of things that have really been in the news and have been a big story lately. And Seth, I know one that's been near and dear to your heart. They've also got some parental controls and some other cool features built into that. So I really enjoyed our conversation with Ram, and look forward to sharing that with our listeners.
Yeah, it was, I think, a pretty good conversation, and the service is a little bit more than I thought. So, but we'll let that go because we've got a lot to cover on the show here today. But I do want to bring up a quick thing. We are $5 away from our live show over at the Patreon page, Jason. I hope you're ready, because it looks like it's going to happen this year.
I'm nervous. It'll be good, though. That'll be good. It'll push us to do something different, and that's never a bad thing in my opinion. So really excited about that, and can't believe we're only $5 away. That is humbling for me. We really didn't have a lot of high expectations when we launched our Patreon page, and we've just got a tight-knit community of really loyal listeners, and realizing that more and more, and we really appreciate it. So for listeners who aren't familiar, and if you want to support the show and support our efforts, you can learn more about that at HomeTech.fm/support, and that's where you can find some more information about our Patreon page, and that's a way that you can financially contribute to our efforts here, and you can do that for as little as $1 a month. We've had a bunch of different people do that, and we really appreciate that. And one of our funding goals that we've set is when we get to a certain level, we will start to do a live show that will really, I think, add a different dynamic to our episodes that I think will be a lot of fun. We'll have a live chat room that we can interact with people when we're recording, and I really look forward to that. And gosh, we're only $5 away from that, so that's hard to believe. So if you're listening to the show and you're a fan and you haven't yet gone to check out our Patreon page, please take a few minutes to go do that. Again, that's HomeTech.fm/support.
Yep. And I do want to also echo your comment there about, thanking all of our patrons that we've had over the last, couple of years. This is truly humbling. And I can't believe we set these goals and we're like, we'll never get to these. And here we are looking down the barrel of a live streaming show with a live chat room. Yeah.
It's a good way to put it.
So we're ready.
We're excited. We're excited about it, but let's jump in. We've got a handful of things we want to touch on here before we jump into our interview with Ram Malasani. If you're tuning in for that interview, be sure to stick with us. That'll be closer to the end of the episode. But as is our usual practice, we're going to jump into a handful of news stories here. And the first one we want to touch on, a couple of stories actually related to the over-the-top streaming content conversation, which is increasingly important. And a lot of people are cutting the cord and looking for alternatives to traditional cable bills and all of that. So this is a conversation that we have often on this podcast, and we talk about this theme rather regularly. And there was just an article this week that caught my attention. This was over on The Verge, and the title of the article is that streaming TV is beginning to look a lot like cable. And I thought this was actually a very well-written article, thought-provoking. I disagree with some of it, but in general, I think the theme of the article is correct. And what he's talking about is this increasing presence of offerings that we're seeing where, you used to, if you rewind maybe a year or two, you had a traditional cable bill on one side, and then on the other side, you had something like a Netflix or Hulu, which was purely a over the network or over the top streaming on demand service. And now you've got these hybrid services, I would call them, like DirecTV Now or Sling TV, which are monthly subscription streaming services. So they're kind of meeting in the middle, and they're saying, okay, we can offer you a monthly price that is lower than what you're paying your cable company right now, and we'll offer you a little bit more flexibility and smaller, maybe bundles is the way to put it, of channels.
Oh boy, it's a bundle.
It's a bundle, and that's the meat of the article. And I know I took a little bit of time to get there, but that's really the meat of the article, is that the author is contesting that model and saying, well, this really doesn't get us where we need to go, and what we really need is truly on-demand, a la carte channel offerings and that sort of thing. So I totally get that, but I think the economics are tough for people to make that work. And I also think where I would contradict this author a little bit is that there are people out there who actually want bundles. I think. Now, you might disagree with me on that, but there are, I think, a lot of people who don't want to give that much thought to picking their channel packages, and they just want something simple where they can pick a group of channels and say, you know what, at night I just want to turn on the TV and maybe pick a particular channel, but I just want something to play. And they're not into that on-demand 24/7 idea, and they just want to have that sort of linear type of programming that traditional cable offers. So I think this author is painting in broad strokes and a little bit too black and white, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're at such a crossroad right now, and I am currently a cord cutter. I have cut off the Comcast cable feed coming to my house for everything other than just basic, the basic internet, fast enough to stream these services in and get decent internet, and I'm good to go. Even doing that, it's been kind of an interesting uphill battle to make things work, to find something that should be streaming. It turns out it isn't streaming. Turns out the app doesn't exist on the Apple TV, but it exists over here. It's a mess right now. So
it's a lot of brain damage, right?
It honestly is. We're just not there. It's still a broken system, and the old system worked fine because that was what came out of the what came out of the TV industry for the past 40, 50, 60 years, where content companies all kind of got together, threw their bunch of money into a pool and made a bunch of shows for networks and syndication. And that worked fine. We saw how well that worked, and that's how an entire industry is set up. So then you have Amazon come in and do grab $100 million, throw it at Kevin Spacey, and say, "Hey, make a House of Cards." And now they've got a nice little program that you can watch on there, along with a half dozen other really good programs that they have financed with Amazon money. And you're seeing Netflix. Yeah, Amazon's doing the same thing. Apple is being rumored to do the same thing. So we're moving away from
that. That's a story we just saw this week. Yeah, that was actually a story that just was on this week. Circulating around the tech press is that Apple's kind of a revitalized interest in doing their own original content, and we won't spend a lot of time on that because we've heard that circulate before, and we're all just sort of waiting to see what Apple's going to do. But I think your broader point is really the more relevant one. I'm sorry, that all these companies are trying to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
But there's still value in that traditional model, in my opinion, of just being able to turn on the TV and have some entertainment that you don't have to give a lot of thought to.
Well, with given all this, we're in an absolute golden age of television right now. Like the best actors are on, and the best writers are going over to HBO, Netflix, Amazon, and quite possibly Apple. I think that's more of just like a rumor of them trying to maybe needle Netflix onto, having better integrations with their TV app on iOS. But everything good right now is on Netflix. We sat down the other day with my in-laws, and we sat down to watch something that was on Netflix. I think it was the Gilmore Girls, like the new season they came out with. The whole family was into that, and they wanted to come over and watch it on the big screen. So we sat around, we fired it up, and they were blown away that you could watch all 4 episodes back to back. Like that doesn't actually. I don't think the vast majority of people have grasped the concept of, just having an entire season's worth of episodes ready to go at whatever time you want to watch them. They don't come out, week after week until you get done 6 months later. And so we're battling that. We're battling an entire industry that is, very entrenched in the way they do things and the way they pay for things. And everybody, and what happens is the customer, me in this case, is really the one that gets hit, because I'm trying to get video that I know exists. I know that I could pay for somehow onto the screen, and quite frankly, I can't do it. I mean, it's tough. It can be a real, like you said earlier, a brain buster, brain damage. Yeah. So, I wish it was easier.
And you can usually figure it out, but it's all the better when it's not the Gilmore Girls.
Right. Well, I mean, it would all be better. Like, yeah, well, dude, my Netflix is way different than my wife's.
I get it. I get it. Let's move on though. We've got a lot to cover here. Voice control is the next topic here, and that's obviously been a recurring theme. We were talking about it week after week, and for very good reasons. So Brookfield Residential, a very big production builder, has recently announced that they are going to have an Alexa smart home available for public tours. And Seth, you and I were talking about this a little bit before we hit record here tonight, and could totally see the comical scene of like your typical general contractor getting ready to walk a client through a house and trying to get the Alexa to work, and it's failing, and he's, throwing around profanities and cursing the smart home. And so I think that, that speaks to a lot of the challenges that builders in general and production builders in particular are going to have with adopting this sort of technology. But I do like to see personally these builders getting behind AI for the smart home, and I think it just presents an interesting opportunity for anyone who's interested in the space, whether you're a manufacturer or a consumer or a builder, to see companies like this out there leading the charge. I commend them, and we'll be interested to see how this shakes out.
Yeah, all jokes aside, this builder is being extremely progressive in what they're doing here. They have integrated lighting, shading, door locks, garage door, a number of things, and they've done it all in-house. Like I don't know what other products they're using basically for the the garage door opener, the lighting control. They don't really say on their website, but you can kind of dig around and find out that they have made their own skill set. This is a Brookfield skill set that they've done, so they have given their clients the ability to control their house with Alexa. This isn't. They're not using Control4. They're not using Crestron. They're using Alexa directly integrated with the devices that they've installed, and kind of bypass basically the entire integration market. So this is a very progressive system here.
Yeah, that to me was the most interesting part of the story. And this story I came across on Digital Trends, and there was I'm quoting here a line in the article that said, what is perhaps most impressive is that Brookfield created custom prompts which allow users to trigger multiple actions with a single command. For instance, if a smart home owner were to say, Alexa, turn on relax, the system would dim the lights, lower the shades, flip on a relaxing playlist, and turn on a soft star panel on the ceiling. So that's really Alexa triggering a scene, right? And that, to me, have always understood to be a limitation of Alexa would be to do that sort of multiple actions. And maybe I'm just misunderstanding it, but I think that's what you're getting at when you say that's probably the most impressive part of this story in terms of what Brookfield has done with this integration.
Yeah, I mean they've gone to a developer, a software developer, made their own Alexa. Here we are, Echo skill set or whatever. We're saying her name. Yeah. You said her name like 30 times, and I know people are going to be freaking out. So
they're like,
hopefully they've all switched their. Well, you can switch your wake word to a computer now. So game
point.
Over.
Computer, turn on the lights.
Yeah. So now someone's lights just came on. But this is a really cool and very progressive system. I'm interested to see where this goes, because this, like I said, this completely bypasses most of the work an integrator would do other than running wire and installing speakers. Like there's no reason for a control system other than the little Amazon Echo devices you could place around the house, add the Brookfield skill in, and you're golden. You're good to go.
Well, and so here's another interesting question that this called to mind, and another story that I saw surface this week related to Josh AI. And so Josh AI has really, kind of pitched their tent on the fact that they can do much more natural language processing and process multiple commands. So whereas an Alexa user, and I'm sorry, I'll say Amazon. I'll stop now. You can turn your echoes back on.
I'll just bleep it out.
Whereas an Echo user might be able to say, turn on the lights and then wait for that to happen, and then turn on, music in the living room and then wait for that to happen, etc. With Josh AI, you can issue like multiple commands in a row. And I totally see that. I get that there's value in that. What I'm trying to understand I would consider myself a layman when it comes to that level of technical knowledge and Amazon skills and how that all comes together. What's the difference? I mean, how is Brookfield doing those multiple commands onto one scene where other people can't? Like, do you know the answer to that?
I would assume that every device they install, the door locks, the garage door opener, the lighting control system, integrates with Alexa already, and they know what those little packages are, so they can go ahead and make their skill set, set in stone with these particular products, because they're not going to sell 3 different lighting control systems across an entire neighborhood. They're going to sell one lighting control system. It's going to be the exact same every single time, and they can just program the software to write that in. So it's not a very difficult thing to do, I guess, if at the size and scope that they're going to be rolling this out. But it's something that I think is interesting. They don't need a central processor for any of this. Everything gets controlled right there from the Echo.
Right. Well, speaking of Josh AI, that wasn't the only news that we saw come out of them. They've actually changed their pricing structure. So there weren't any hard numbers in this story, and I get that, not a big deal. But, really that's been one of the conversations that we've had numerous times about Josh AI is it's a high price point. Let's be honest. And we've given them credit on the show for sticking to their guns there and justifying that. And, we really like what they're doing at Josh AI. We've talked about that on numerous occasions. And one of the big themes that Seth, you and I have always hit on is like, why aren't these guys putting more emphasis on the fact that this is more than a voice control solution? Like it really is. When you and I went and looked at it at CEDIA this past year, we realized that it's really more than just a voice control solution. It could be very easily a replacement for like a full-blown Crestron system, in my opinion. And so this story that surfaced this week, I thought was refreshing to see Josh AI putting some emphasis on that and saying that, this is really about more than voice control. And the new pricing model, again, no hard numbers on that, but they are now offering a lower price of entry that does, in my understanding, require a higher monthly software licensing fee, where the outright purchasing price that we talked about on previous episodes, I believe, did not require that monthly fee. So interesting to see what they're doing there, and really, I'm a fan. I'm pulling for these guys, but I think it's just it's an evolving landscape, and we'll just have to see.
Yeah, I'm pulling for them as well. Interesting here in the article, it has a little in parentheses, dealer pricing is in the 5 figures. So not giving anything away. You can see how expensive this system was just for one line item that you would get in as part of a smart home. It doesn't include like lighting control. It doesn't include Sonos for the music. That doesn't include Lutron for shades. So 5 figures is quite expensive. It says now that you can do 25% down with a monthly software licensing fee for a 5-year full service upgraded warranty plan. I think that's pretty good. I mean, if you want this type of system, this is a very advanced voice control, not
AI,
just home control system. I think
love it. Yeah, love it. Well, speaking of AI, there was one more story that I wanted to touch on, and this is kind of a silly video. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this story, but I do want to direct our listeners to go watch this video, because I think it's all at once an interesting concept and a very, in my opinion, silly video. But this is LEQ, and it's a quote unquote friendly looking Amazon. I'm not going to say the A word for the elderly. So this is kind of like an aging in place type of market. Or product, I should say, is in terms of how this is being positioned. And I don't know how for real this thing is. It's kind of a lingering CES type of story, I think. And there are some interesting facets to it, though. The concept video, how this thing moves and has sort of natural motion, Seth, I thought was really interesting. I don't know if you saw that. I think there's some interesting angles to that, but I don't know. Aging in place market is poised for huge growth, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And that was really what caught my eye about this story is, how this sort of design and concept fits in to the real market, and will aging people in their homes really, I don't want to say evolve, but will they really adopt sort of a artificial intelligence AI type of product to be the way the video shows it? And I have my doubts about that, but interesting nonetheless. Thought provoking.
I am hugely skeptical on the aging in place market. That never seems to come around, even though there are more and more elderly people every day that seem to need this stuff. And I don't see it really happening the way we've all been led to believe that it could happen.
It's a tempting target, right? I mean,
it's a big number, right? But yeah, this is traditionally a block that doesn't deal with technology well. And I know that this little robot thing that spins around and asks you if you want to see the next Facebook post, might be a good way to do that. But again, adopting this stuff is it's an uphill battle for someone who may not even have internet in the home. Like how is that going to work very well for them? So like I said, hugely skeptical on aging in place and what it's going to do. I think things like driverless cars that will be more productive for the aging in place community than little gizmos that we can shove into the house. I mean,
I agree. I agree with you. I have my doubts, but I think this is a video worth watching if you're at all interested in what people are thinking about or conceptualizing for that market. We'll have a link to the video up for that at HomeTech.fm/144. So that's an interesting one that you can go check out. But let's move on. Next story here, we got Ecobee 3. Product that's been out for a while. We've talked about Ecobee before. Big fan of what those guys are doing, and they've got the HomeKit integration that they've had for some time now. But new news, as I understand it, is that these sensors can, they've always had that remote temp sensor thing, and that's what I've loved about them. They were really the market leader on that. I have one in my house. That was my main buying consideration, was that they had that, and at the time no one else did. But my understanding now is that these have a deeper integration with HomeKit. But Seth, I think you have a little better grasp of the story than I do, so I'll let you jump in here.
Well, it's a strange, like, if you go into HomeKit, if you have the Ecobee 3 thermostat, and you go into HomeKit, you can actually see that it does have a little line item there for motion detected, and it says yes. But I guess Ecobee has updated their device firmware to enable kind of a sensor input into Apple HomeKit. So this is, I don't know where the upgrade happened. I know that the upgrade happened before in HomeKit, and now you're seeing devices kind of proliferate down into that. And a motion detector device is one of those devices that they added in. And now Ecobee took existing hardware and is rolling out a firmware update, which, by the way, I have not gotten yet. I'm really, really wanting this thing. But they're rolling out the firmware update that gives the ability to add these remote sensors in for triggering off, scenes or turning on and off lights and that kind of thing. It can detect if somebody's in the room. And since it's not going out to the cloud and through the Ecobee API, it doesn't take 3 minutes to update. This should be an instant thing. So I'm really hoping to get my hands on it. I really hope it is instant. Like if I walk in the room, maybe my lights can kick on. That'd be great. So I will report back whenever the firmware gets to my device.
All right. Well, we'll be waiting, and I think it's an interesting story to me because it speaks to the power of HomeKit. You've got a Ecobee sensor that really primarily was designed to be a temperature sensor, and now through this HomeKit framework or API or whatever we're calling it, can be made to act as also a motion sensor to trigger various scenes, lighting, shades, security, whatever. I think that's great. I think that's really interesting, and that's what I love about the vision of HomeKit, and I think you and I agree on that. And so we'll be waiting to see what you find out, Seth. But let's move on here. Our final story before we jump into our interview is actually a little offbeat for us, but a social media story. And it looks like home automation is actually a topic to watch, according to Facebook IQ. And I have to be honest, prior to the story, I hadn't heard about Facebook IQ, but apparently that's their data points that they have. And millennial men apparently are very hot about home automation and are posting about it 8 times more than they were a year ago, which to me is fascinating.
Oh Lord, analytics is coming to save us here.
Exactly.
So, yeah, maybe I don't know. We've been talking about this for what, almost going into 3 years now. Yeah, it's home automation. Maybe it'll have some staying power that now that Facebook says it's something.
It's catching on.
Yeah.
Now here are some of the tags. So this is relevant. Here are some of the tags that they use to discern this. Amazon Echo, closed circuit television, I thought was interesting. Fitbit, Google, home cinema, IFTTT or IFT. There's a lot of debate about how you say that. Security alarm, Spotify, and technology. So those are the tags that they cited, or as I should say, associated topics for, I'm not sure exactly how this works or what that means, but the interesting thing to me that caught my eye is that it just seems to be trending, and this article specifically cites millennial men. So I don't know what that means. I'm trying to parse that still. But I thought it was interesting nonetheless.
I think it means that any guy who wants home automation in his house really needs to work on, having the spouse expecting, what is it? The wife expect? Yeah, I can't say it. I'm laughing.
Or the spouse acceptance factor.
Yeah. Again, home automation is not something that you put in your home, and if you're the only one there, that's fine. But if there are other people living in the home, I mean, even me installing this Ecobee thermostat in our house took about a week or two for my wife to adjust and say, okay, the thermostat's actually working correctly.
Get the buy-in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's something new. It's different. It doesn't work how the old one worked. And, she's fairly good. She's actually really good with technology, but she didn't feel that this thermostat was working as efficiently as the other thermostat because it did.
Yep.
It worked differently. So, you hear these stories all the time, buying Hue light bulbs and putting them all in only to, have the spouse come home and say, take them out. I mean, it's
these things are awful.
Yeah.
What did you do?
Exactly. So it's one of those things, like you really need to, I know this is a guy subject. You can look at like our industry, and it's mostly men. And I'd really like to see more women get involved, because really we do need a difference of opinion in this industry. Really, really, really need a difference of opinion, because guys, I mean, we're good, I guess, with technical stuff and whatever, but lifestyle, oh my gosh, we're pretty horrible with that. So I would say
I would agree.
We need both genders to come to the table and to help move the home automation industry forward, rather than just being so lopsided.
I like it. I think that's a good place to wind down our conversation here and jump into our interview with Ram Malasani. And again, Ram is the CEO of Securify, which is the company behind the Almond brand of routers. And he joined us to discuss a really interesting new security service that they're offering as part of that Almond family of routers. We really enjoyed our conversation with Ram, and hope you do as well. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. Hey, Ram, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hey, Jason and Seth. Thanks for having me. How are you guys?
Yeah, we're doing great. We appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to come on and join us to talk about this new service you guys have offered. But first, I want to ask you: you clearly you survived CES? How did it go?
I did survive CES. It was probably our best CES. There was a lot of interest in this IoT security service we launched there.
That's great. Yeah, I think that it's a really it's a very interesting offering, and we're gonna jump in and talk about that. So let's just get started and give us the quick elevator pitch, because we'll get into some of the details and how it works and pricing and stuff like that. But what is a really quick 1 or 2 sentence kind of explanation of what this new service is all about?
So it's we've all seen what happened with that Mirai botnet attack, which brought down internet for a lot of people in the East Coast, I think back in October. What happened there was a bunch of common household networking devices like cameras, DVRs were hacked, and millions of them. And they were used to, in turn, launch an attack on this DNS provider called Dyn. So at a very high level, what we are trying to do is, with everything becoming connected, a router as being the gateway at home can do a lot to protect your network, even if you have devices that are vulnerable inside your network. So there are 2 parts to the service we have. One is this really interesting scanning that we do for every device on the network. And second part, we added additional layer for specific IoT devices on top. I know this was longer than a typical elevator pitch, but at a very
no worries.
Yeah, high level, it's how do you secure all these IoT devices that that just more and more of these devices are coming into the market every single day. How do you prevent attacks like that Mirai botnet attack? So this is our attempt at a solution against those problems.
Right. And this is really, I mean, as Jason and I talked about on the show and a number of times now, because the security thing has been kind of close to my heart. I just really think this is going to be a big deal this coming up year. So I was really happy to see you guys come out with this. This is not something an end user may even know is going on in their house, right? This is like if one of their devices gets infected because it doesn't have the correct firmware updated on it, they may never know. And you sitting between that device and the internet are you're really the only way to tell if something is going on.
That's exactly right. And, that's what we learned at CES as well. Like, just like you mentioned, this is a very timely service. And that's why we saw so much interest, because, a lot of people said the same thing at CES. A big theme we heard was, we're walking this floor, especially in that Sands Expo smart home area and the Eureka Park, where everything is connected. There's not a single thing that is not connected in that entire floor. And so many of these products are coming from little startups who may or may not have the skill or resources to look into proper security. They're just looking to, ship their product as soon as possible, right? And who's going to protect all this? And how are we going to prevent attacks like Mirai? And most people in the industry felt like Mirai was just the beginning. So yeah, there is just a general feeling that this is very timely, and the problems like Mirai are only going to get worse and bigger.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's, like Seth alluded to, a topic that we've talked about numerous times on the show, and think it's going to be a topic of increasing importance moving forward. So we've touched on what it does, and it's really about protecting your personal network and your personal information, of course, that lives on that network. But talk a little bit about how it does this. Like, I know one of the features, at least, is that it's monitoring for unusual traffic. So give us, in layman's terms, how that works and what sort of method you guys are using to determine what suspicious traffic looks like, and what sort of actions are triggered based on that.
Sure. So there are two layers to it, the way we think about it. At the very core level, we start with a network scan. And, the best analogy for this is like the antivirus scans that, we're all familiar with, that run on PCs, where, we scan every single device on the network. We look for open ports. We look for services like HTTP servers or Telnet servers or SSH servers on the network. And if we find those services, we go one level further. I mean, there are a bunch of tools that provide this basic level of services. You have tools like Nmap, and you can even look at things like Wireshark to see if there are services like these. But we go beyond that. If we find a web server running, if we find a Telnet server running, or an SSH server running on any of the devices on your network, we actually try to log into. So we do white hat hacking on your own network. Log into those servers using default well-known passwords. And this is how the Mirai attack took place. And so we'll let you know if, say, you have a camera on your network that has an open Telnet server with default username and password, like admin or admin password or admin 1235678. Right. So that's the foundation layer of the security service. And by the way, this is a very intense network scan. This single scan of a network can take anywhere from 20 minutes to 45 minutes.
Wow.
We do it in such a way that we don't want to cause any reduction in speed for your regular traffic. So we don't want to overload your network while we are running these scans. That's one of the reasons why it takes so long. And second is, it's just the number of things we test for. It's so many, it takes that long. That's the foundation layer. And then on top of this, there is this additional layer, which is what you talked about, which is looking at unusual traffic patterns. There, the second layer doesn't run on every device on your network. It runs on certain specific devices. We are starting with about 20 devices today. And what we're doing is we're starting with the really popular IoT devices like Amazon Echo, Philips Hue, Nest Thermostat, Nest Cam, Nest Protect, even other smart home hubs like SmartThings, Wink hubs. And what we're doing is we're looking at the traffic patterns, outgoing traffic patterns from these devices. The really interesting thing about IoT devices is they, by design, are meant to only talk to certain websites. So, for example, a Nest Cam is only supposed to talk to Nest.com, Google.com, and we can learn this behavior over time. We're starting with 20, but we hope to expand this to hundreds and perhaps thousands in the future. So for every device, we know what the right pattern is, what a normal pattern is, and if any device goes beyond that pattern, we'll flag you. So that's the second layer of this IoT security service.
So let's say I have I have an almond and I've got the service, and you've flagged me. What can I now do as an end user with that information? How will I stop this device or even know what to do with this device when you figure out that it's been infected and doing nefarious things on my network?
This is a great question, and honestly, this was a little bit tough question to answer even for us when we were looking at building this service, because how do you convey messages about open ports and things like that, right? So we've put in some educational content in the app to say, like, if there are open ports, like, is this bad? Is this good? Sometimes it's a gray area. Now, if you have weak usernames and passwords, that's bad straight away. Now, for any of these devices, you can block then and there. We're not doing automatic blocking today. And we also inform the users that, hey, perhaps there is a new firmware update for this device that closes this problem. So this, honestly, like this, how do you message these problems? We are still learning. We're launching with a certain messaging on this, but I imagine, like, we have work to do on this area. It's going to be part education, part, I can imagine at some point we will classify threats and then we will automatically block for certain threats. As of today, we're not automatically blocking. We are doing some classification in terms of how serious this is. But I think this will be an ongoing thing for us where, we'll keep getting better in terms of how we message, how we educate customers, because it's not always black or white with these problems,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think you guys are taking the right approach for what it's worth, in my opinion. Excuse me. I don't think you can just automatically block things and shut them off. I think that would be a pretty heavy-handed approach. And I think a lot of this is about education, and that goes across the board. I think that applies to device manufacturers and end users and home technology professionals who are installing this stuff by trade, and a lot of this just across the board comes down to education. And so I think that I could see that being a tough challenge when you're in product design and trying to figure out what you're going to do with this service and what you do with the information. But I think that arming your end users with the information and allowing them to make that choice is probably your best bet at this point. So talk about there's an additional layer on this, which I think is smart and something that I've seen increasing demand for in my work as a home technology professional, and that is parental controls on the network. And I know you guys have that incorporated into this service. So talk about that.
Yeah. So we have, along with this, we already have the blocking stuff and scheduling devices. Say if you have kids, that's already part of the Almond app. But what we have new is this site monitoring. You can see what your kids are doing on the network. One really cool thing that we have done, in fact, I won't name companies, but some of the companies that have been doing this, they saw our approach and they were really impressed with one thing we have done. We've put a lot of work into filtering these sites, because what happens typically is, and you guys deal with networks all the time, so you know it, when you go to, say, any website, like you go to NewYorkTimes.com, but what actually happens if you look at the traffic on Wireshark, or even if you open debug mode in Chrome browser, is when you go to NewYorkTimes.com, you're going to like 20 different websites. So as for parental controls, sometimes it's very confusing because, there is like 1:20 in terms of signal to noise. So it's hard to know what is going on. So we put a lot of work into like reducing this noise for this parental controls. And so when you look at it, you have a very high signal to noise ratio because, there's so many ad tech sites that you end up visiting on the website and you don't even know you're going to those sites. So that's, we don't yet do blocking yet based on categories and stuff. It's in our pipeline. But what we also understood from a lot of parents is sometimes they don't just want to block it because you can block from the Wi-Fi network, but they'll use their phones, 3G, 4G, to go to those sites. And a lot of times what we heard from parents was they just want to have a conversation about the kind of sites they're visiting. It's not, they don't want to take like punitive action that,
right.
From these
sites. I get that. Yeah, got it. Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one thing we haven't touched on is this solution limited to Almond 3, or is this for the entire family of Almond routers?
That's a great question. We are first launching it on Almond 3, but it will accept the very first Almond, which we stopped shipping almost a year ago. I mean, there is a variation of it which we are shipping now. So except the very first one, all the other Almonds, Almond Plus, Almond 2015, Almond A1A is the submodel name. All of them will get this update by end of February. So it's not just Almond 3 that will get this service.
Very cool. Very cool. And so the service, let's talk a little bit about pricing on it. This is something you buy the Almond router, and then this is something you add on as a monthly subscription from what I was reading. Tell us a little bit about the pricing and how that's going to work.
Yeah. So, as some of your listeners would know, everything in the Almond app up until now, even when it goes through cloud, it's been a free service. There was no monthly fee for monitoring your network remotely. But this IoT security service specifically, and some aspects of this parental controls, which is monitoring the sites, this is going to be a paid service. We are starting at a discounted price of about $4 a month. It's $39 if you pay for the whole year in advance. And we expect at a later point, the price would go up to about $9 a month.
Yeah, I saw that in the press release. And so I wanted to ask about that because the press release specifically mentioned that the price would likely go up as additional features were rolled out. And that's probably a good way to start winding down our conversation here. Can you lift the curtain and tell us anything about additional features and the roadmap for this service? Or are you guys still sort of developing that?
So we're still developing that. I mean, I've hinted at a couple of the ideas already. Right now for the second layer of security, which looks into traffic patterns and alerts about unusual patterns, we're only covering about 20 devices at launch, and we expect to, aggressively expand this to hundreds of devices. We think a lot of value in this service comes from not from the premier brands, because if you think about it, the top 20 brands, the Nests of the world, Amazon, Google, Ring, August, these guys, they probably do a very good job of security. But once you get out of the top brands, that's when the real concerns come up, right? So we think the real value of the second piece of the IoT security will show up once we start covering these hundreds of devices, IoT devices out there. So that's one thing. A couple other things I can't talk about, but this is a very important service for us, and you'll be seeing constant updates, minor and major from us on a quarterly basis, or maybe even more often.
Very cool. That's good to hear. Having a router that gets updated firmware, once a quarter is great, because I can tell you some of the brands that you may or may not have mentioned earlier. I went to update a router the other day, and the last firmware on it was from 2014. So I said, it's time for a new router. we're not going to use this one anymore. So, well, I kind of want to zoom out here and take a look at this the security landscape that you see shaping up in front of you. This seems like a pretty big deal, especially after the Mirai botnet this year or this last year. That IoT security is going to be a major point for both consumers and manufacturers moving forward. And I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on how you see, the Almond line, the Securify line, fitting in with that. You guys have been very progressive and very aggressive in getting security features built into your routers like this one before anybody else. But I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on what you think this industry may look like towards the end of the year where it relates to security.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, security is on a lot of journalists, and because of what happened with Mirai, even consumers' mind. I think IoT security, I personally believe, is going to be one of the big themes in smart home for 2017. And like you also pointed out, we've always been very progressive about how we think about the role of routers at home. There's been so much going on with mesh Wi-Fi in the industry in the last 1 year, but we've been talking about easy to set up routers since 2012. We've been talking about routers that look good, that you can, show off instead of shoving it inside a closet since 2012. And we've been doing the router plus smart home hub since 2013. So we are very early with this IoT security. We think, again, we're pioneering here. We'll see probably some of the other players think about this and come in. So yeah, I think we expect this will be a big area of focus for us in 2017.
I love it. I think you guys are on the right track, and I think this is an important topic and very timely feature release for you guys. So we'll look forward to seeing what you can do with this moving forward, and we appreciate you taking the time to come on and join us. If anyone is listening and wanted to connect with you to learn more or maybe ask you a follow-up question, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Just go to www.securify.com. Securify with the I at the end, not Y. So that's the best place to get information.
Yeah, and we'll make sure that we include a link to that in our show notes. So once again, Ram, we appreciate you taking the time to come on and join us, and wish you the best with this new offering.
Thank you so much, Jason. Always a pleasure to join you and Seth on these. I just love your podcast, and so my pleasure.
All right. Thanks for saying that. We appreciate the good feedback, Ram, and we'll look forward to reconnecting with you again in the future. Take care.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Jason.